recording going here. Okay, we're recording.
All right, and we are starting stuff up on the audio. Here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the Science of Fantasy Football? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method, which is guaranteed to make you a more consistent fantasy football player. How can I give any guarantees in something as wacky as what we've seen the first 2 weeks of fantasy football this year? It's because using the scientific method just means we're using statistics in a smarter way. And in a statistically driven game like fantasy football, that will improve your process and make you a more consistent winner. Joining me as does each and every week. He is the professor, folks. He's the professor not just of fantasy football, but a real professor. It's John Bush. And John, heading into week 3, we've seen some crazy things and lots of injuries so far this year.
Yeah, lots of injuries. Things. Week 1 was really strange. Week 2, we're doing some tracking of metrics for Vegas and trying to experiment losing money with Vegas props. Actually, I think Dennis has been doing really well. I got clobbered week 1, week 2, I made money. So I'm just trying to, we're doing secret testing right now. Just wanted to hint that again. Hopefully next year we'll have something more to say about that. But anyway, that's up going. I'm tracking the data, the results. I'm telling you, week 1 was really wacky as far as passing yards and whatnot. So, yeah, a lot of things, a lot of injuries. Boy, George Kittle, we thought we had that solid, tight end, and then Ingram we were hoping to get back. We did get back Ferguson, and I'm talking about tight ends, and I've got some discussion, Dennis. I know we're going to segue into on PPR snaps and that, so we'll circle back to that. But I think Dennis has got stuff to talk about this week, as far as griping, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, Professor, because maybe I'm just so relaxed after a nice vacation in the mountains of Tennessee, just hanging out, having a good time, getting away from the grind. Yeah, I was still spending some time on fantasy football, but I admit it, folks. I got nice and relaxed up in the mountains of Tennessee when the Bears weren't coming to visit. So maybe this has affected my mentality. But when I came back yesterday and started looking at fantasy football Twitter a little closer, there's a lot of really, really angry fantasy football players out there. And boy, oh boy, fantasy receipts has been in such good form. This is an early season form from fantasy receipts. They're ready for the fantasy football receipts playoffs with how they've been roasting people. And here's what I want to ask, Professor, because again, maybe I'm just too laid back from the mountains of Tennessee, hanging out with my
I
hillbilly
like
soul.
your accent. That's good. I'm sure people
Hanging
in the
out,
volunteer state appreciate that.
hanging out with my hillbilly soul and just
Yeah,
kicking back. Hey, I did some moonshine tasting
I knew you
when I was
did.
down there. I did some hard apple cider, hard cider tastings when I was
Are
down
you
there
running for
in
president, flipping your
beautiful
accents back
Tennessee.
and forth?
I might be. I might be looking to get that Tennessee hillbilly boat from up in the mountain ways where I've been staying the last couple of days.
Yeah.
But now here's the question. Why are people so upset with fantasy receipts when all they are doing is pointing out that when somebody says this is a 100% lock, guaranteed season winner, and they get roasted because this player has absolutely been awful for the first 2 weeks. Why are you so sensitive to this? You had it coming to you. I just don't understand the fantasy football world's hysterical hatred of fantasy receipts. They crack me up.
I will say, in just kind of a commentary, fantasy receipts picks low hanging fruit. That's fine.
Oh yeah.
And in other words, it's like professional baseball, but if they still use the T-ball tee and let these big hitters tee off. That's what fantasy receipts is doing. Folks, you're setting up your prediction on a little thing and they're just taking a whack at it. Uh, so don't do that. It's not absolute. And the second thing, it would be nice if fantasy receipts maybe acknowledge that there's range of outcomes and people who speak that way and try to use data. And there are some out there like that. They don't get their due on fantasy receipts, right? Because it's not as funny. In other words, if I say, yeah, this week Ferguson's going to catch 2 touchdowns for Dallas tight end, he'll be number 1, or he could be number 24. That's not red meat for fantasy receipts, right? I guess if he had 4 touchdowns, they could say, man, this guy was really goofy. He didn't include the ceiling being at 4 touchdowns. He only said 2. That doesn't have the same chew factor versus Ferguson is going to be the tight end 1 for the season, kind of, that just here it is. I'm going to just call all the weeks he'll be in the Hall of Fame, whatever. That's easy to chew on. So fantasy receipts, I think their fangs are a little dull, and they don't need to. Dennis, the world that they live in, they don't need sharp fangs. Just a few. Take the false teeth out and gum some of these experts, and they'll do just fine. Because these guys, folks, you're just setting them up. You're just putting the baseball on the little tee, and fantasy receipts are just knocking it out of the park. Come on, man. Let's don't do that. How about that?
And here's a free here. Oh, that's great. That is great. Shohei Hatani would be
Yeah.
a 100
Wow.
home run, 50,
50
stolen
50
base
guy.
steal guy.
51. Yeah.
Yeah, he made the 50-50 with legit pitching. Could you imagine if he was getting a hit off of a tee? The guy got hit 100 home runs.
Imagine fantasy receipts pitching to him.
But here's the thing, folks. I'm going to give a little free advice to the fantasy football world. If you make a very bold, outlandish take on fantasy football Twitter, and then 10 minutes into the game, when the player you said would do nothing has already gone over 100 yards, and you delete your tweet, you're
quickly
going to bring a lot. You're going to bring a lot of attention to yourself, and fantasy receipts is going to be all over that. I saw a guy who actually, and I won't name names because I don't want to embarrass him, but he's been embracing fantasy football receipts when they've been attacking other people.
Well, it's fun.
Okay.
Everybody wants to sit in the crowd
fun.
and throw a stone. Sure.
Well, he got attacked this past Sunday. And within 5 minutes of being attacked, he had blocked fantasy football receipts, which to them is like a badge of honor that they're going to now brag about even more. So it doesn't pay to block them, folks. Just mute them. If you don't want to see what they're saying, roasting you again, mute them. Then they won't be able to have that extra ammunition that so-and-so, who used to be one of our best friends and was always sharing our roasts of other fantasy football analysts, has now gotten a sensitive skin and now has blocked us. If you're going to brag about fantasy receipts like we do, we find them funny occasionally. I mean, I will actually go on their site or on their Twitter feed, and I will mention when I think they went too far. Okay, guys, I think you're going too far. I will go ahead and call them out publicly to their face when I think they've gone too far, but usually they're funny. And I'm gonna miss at least 20% of my fantasy football forecasts. I know it. Doesn't mean I'm bad at this game. First 2 weeks, DeAndre Swift, Michael Pittman, they've hurt my fantasy football teams. And I'm starting to wonder whether I was wrong about those players. Not sure that I was 100% wrong about them yet. Maybe I overdrafted Pittman a little bit. I think Swift was cheap enough that even if he flails in the wind all year, he didn't hurt your team any. But yeah, I was probably wrong on those two guys. But I was right about Quentin Johnson being less than a stiff. I was right about having him on a bunch of my best ball teams. I was a little less certain to take him in best ball, or in redraft, I should say, but I have quite a few shares in redraft. I have more in best ball. But, if you're going to be wrong about a player, be wrong about a player. Like, don't worry about it. Go on to the next. Do not be so soft when you are forecasting anything. I don't care whether it's weather. I don't care if it's horse racing, fantasy football, over-under bets, whatever you are predicting in life. If you are trying to forecast the future, you are going to be wrong a fair amount of the time. You're not going to be perfect 100% of the time. It's just like a Major League Baseball player. If he hits 350, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. That means 65% of the time, he didn't get on base. Yet, don't about that, do we? Because we know what the skill score is for that occupation, just like we know what the skill score is for fantasy football. If you are right versus consensus, in other words, your ranking for a player versus ADP, if you are ranking a guy higher than ADP,
this is preseason.
Preseason, higher than ADP, and he finishes higher than ADP. If you hit 7 out of 10 of those predictions, and same to the low side, if I've got a guy that he's going as wide receiver 3, and I think he's going to be wide receiver 13. And he finishes 20th. Well, I was right about that guy. Doesn't matter how. If I was wrong that he was 13th and he turns out 20th, I was right because the whole rest of the fantasy football world drafted him a long time before he came to me in the draft, because I had him ranked much, much lower. That's all I'm talking about. Plus or minus versus ADP, not perfection. If you're right 7 out of 10 times, so you're going to be wrong 30% of the time, folks, you are going to make a ton of money in fantasy football. So don't worry about your 30% that you blew. Celebrate the 70% that you got right. Because if you consistently outforecast ADP, you're going to win. And that's what this game is all about. So stop being so doggone sensitive.
And Dennis, I agree with that. And when you bring up, and this is a segue to my little, and it's not a gripe, folks, just continued bandwagon about definitions. The reason I asked Dennis about his ADP, let's call it sleeper bust season versus weekly sleeper bust kind of thing.
Yes.
Big difference in the definition. And sometimes that gets muddled. And so our great friend that we met, Greg Kellogg, at the expo was reading. I follow him. Everybody should follow at Gregory L. Kellogg. I'm looking at his Twitter handle. Everybody follow him and Tip, Mr. Tip Major. Follow Tip Major as well. So we're gonna those are friends of Science and Fantasy Football. We love them, as well as Asylum Football. Everybody should follow Asylum football. But anyway, there was a discussion. Apparently, Greg, they do a weekly sleeper calls, players that are thought maybe not to be good that they're calling good. I guess it's a little bit unclear on the definition, but they were discussing week one. They use ADPs, right? And Greg actually put up a poll. He said, how long should they use ADP as a ruler for what a sleeper is? 1 week, 2 weeks, all year, three. He's trying to get a poll. And for me, I would say the first week. And it turns out the polling says either week one or week three, 40%. The rest, 2 weeks. Isn't that interesting? People want 3 weeks, try to this pattern thing happening. And there was somebody, and I'm not going to mention that, and again, one of the responses, once is a fluke, twice is a trend, 3 times is a pattern. That's all well and good. And in Europe, if you found one swan that was white, okay, is that a fluke? Well, you find 2 swans. Oh, that's a trend. I found 3 white swans. That's a pattern. It's a pattern till you go to Australia and there's a black swan there. So 1 black swan versus 1,000,000 white swans in Europe, and the pattern's broken. So now the new pattern, Dennis, is swans are either white or black. When they find a golden one somewhere, I don't think they will at this point, but if they do, then the pattern will have to change again. So remember these definitions, Dennis, and this is me. One day, this is my hope, one day we will have a scientific society, people with masters, PhDs in fantasy football, informatics. I'm calling the degree, these universities, y'all should jump on board, start training some. I mean, and we're talking data people, we're talking scientists, we're talking meteorologists, physicists, botanists, whoever, anybody that's used to dealing with large amounts of data, they could be in there as well. But scientific societies make definitions that become the law of the land, and then they will change accordingly. If the swan is golden, then they will change it. The Ornithology Society will change whatever the pattern is, whatever the verbiage is. So we don't have that in fantasy. So therefore, you end up having discussions like Greg was discussing on how to define a weekly sleeper versus a seasonal sleeper, and that's fine. And I think the concept that they're going to come with, and Tip jumped in, says is the season progresses, we'll have more grasp of weekly rankings. So that I agree with that, right? Our consistency numbers will look a lot better after 10 weeks versus 12. So one last thing, we probably won't ever get a society of PhD level sports informaticists. They'll need a degree, they'll have a society, they'll have meetings, they'll have a journal. They will define that. We won't get a bust or a sleeper or what really is a zero RB method. Or Dennis, I don't think we're going to have that, but there is hope. About 150 years of horse race betting, we, Dennis and I included in that population, we all agree, overlay and underlay, because we're looking at the odds and we make a prediction, and a lot of times a bet or not a bet. Overlay on, it took 150 years, maybe a little, maybe 50 years or something, to establish what that meant, right? So it's common, even the hot dog man understands when you walk by, hey, number 2 in this next race is sure is a big overlay at 8-1. The hot dog man figures that out, right? He knows that. So everybody in horse racing, having had hundreds of years, Dennis, it settled kind of by the popular usage. Fantasy football, we don't have that kind of settling yet. I think we're now just starting to get to the point where we can say the next 50 years there'll be settlements as to what really is a seasonal sleeper. But Dennis, probably you and I, unless we freeze our head in liquid nitrogen and they'll put us on a Terminator robot body in 50, we won't get to see the end of that. So I don't think we will ever get true definitions that everybody agrees on. And so therefore it becomes emotional. Damn it, I know a sleeper is X below ADP. 5 slots. Dennis went from 3 to, so 10 slots. Dennis proposes 10 slots. That's going to make somebody mad. No, it's 20 slots. And then it becomes emotional. And that's like politics we're seeing now. It's all emotional. Nobody cares about the facts. It feels, you know, you're bad. You suck because you're doing, you know, you support candidate A. I support B because I'm smart and whatever. And it's emotional. There's no facts anymore. It's just one emotional, they said this, we're angry or we happy, depends on how we feel about it. So we're still debating emotionally about things that won't be solved either through popularity, I'm thinking 100 years, or through a scientific society, Dennis. We're stuck in this rut here. And Fantasy Receipts loves it because they don't want clear definitions because, you know, it's not as fun. You know, they won't be able to hit as many out of the park uh, versus everything shifting, and it's just ludicrous, some of the statements that are being said. That was my diatribe.
And here's that's a great diatribe, Professor, because you notice that anytime that I write an article and I'm pointing out that a player is a sleeper or whatever, I define what sleeper means to me.
Yep.
And that's the only way I know how to deal with this environment that we are in right now, is every time I make a statement about a player being a great find or a great advantage to have, a great weekly value, as I like to say, it's always defined. And maybe I do that as a matter of course because I come from a science background, but of a science background that is really quite young as a science. If you look at the world of meteorology and how long we have been accurately understanding and charting weather data, Professor, it's 50 years worth of data that really makes a difference right now. And this planet has experienced weather since its beginning. You know, so that's many, many years. So, but in meteorology, until we had worldwide coverage of the planet with weather satellite data that was good, like quality measurements, we have no clue what happened in the world prior to that time. We don't have a good measurement of what even the ocean temperatures were in the 1930s, the 1950s. That didn't come along until even later than the satellite data, which is astounding to people, but it's reality. We didn't measure the temperatures of the surface of the planet very well until we had satellite data. So when I look at fantasy football, I look at a sport that is even younger than meteorology, than modern meteorology, since the advent of the satellite weather satellites in the mid 1970s.
And they got weather stations they had, but now with the nanotech and all the satellites, Starlink and things, you probably can put a lot more sensors to the point where I know in agriculture, they're monitoring, your acreage of land and looking at
Oh yeah.
temperature and moisture differentials and getting real-time data. So I think in the next 50 years, look at all the data, and we're going to have a clearer picture. Doesn't mean we'll have an exact picture. There's still going to be some exceptions. There's some weird places in this world. There's, what's
Oh
that
yeah.
one mountain up in New Hampshire that has like 250-mile-per-hour winds at one point, and Death Valley. I mean, there are extremes everywhere. And actually, in biology, those extremes are good because space biologists love strange environments like a salty lake. What can live, or what can live at the ocean under deep pressures? What's the body style? What are the distribution of the flora and the fauna in these kind of extreme hot, cold environments, these kind of things. It's a lot of understanding what we might find on Mars, for instance, or maybe the moons of Jupiter. So it may not be us, but our ancestors. So we're getting data and understanding about a lot of things, not just weather, Dennis, the climate and whatnot. That's going to be useful if we ever do want to go live on Mars. It won't be us. Like I said, they'll pop our head out of the freezer, flop it on a body or something, and we'll be walking around talking like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, the Science of Fantasy Football podcast hosted by two Captain Pikes,
Oh
just
yeah,
going around in our
that's
little
old school Star
little
Trek
little
there.
carts. I know. I had to throw out something for the older generation. But here's the thing, Professor. Just like in science,
Yeah,
the world of fantasy football
yeah,
will evolve as well. And our understanding of fantasy football continues to evolve. And I think a big part of this is looking at data different. And I haven't had a chance to look at this article yet that
yeah,
you put
yeah.
out
And
this
this
week.
segue to this article. So I was bored Friday. So I'd already hosted the snap report week 1 and 2, and I usually just focus on snaps, who's doing what, who's changing, what does the team use? Do they use tight ends more, wide receiver? Kind of these global patterns, which I use pre-draft, and then lineups and trades and these kind of things. So you can check that out, snap report. But I said, I really didn't talk a lot about PPR point scores per snap. So I just, it's been crazy. And I know the passing yards have been crazy. Okay. My Vegas metrics have been crazy. Week 1 was just nuts compared to week 2. And I'm curious what week 3. So I decided to do this article. I call it a bonus because it's Dr. Bush just had a little time Friday. I, you know, I do these things, Dennis, because I got a bunch of tests to grade. And so if you're smart, you'll find other things to do instead of grading. That, as a professor, Dennis, that's an old trick. You put the papers somewhere and you don't look at them for a while, and the students are complaining this, okay, damn it, I guess I better grade them. Because you don't want to grade, because, as a professor, every person, fantasy football player I draft, I want them to be number one, right? The best. I want every team to win. And every year I'm disappointed, Dennis. I make money, but I want so much more than I ever get. And that striving, Dennis, leads to these kind of articles. I got to dig more. I cannot sit around and just on the shelf. It's a moving target that's always moving. The ice is always thin sometimes or thick, but you never know until you make that step. So anyway, what I did, I was interested first 2 weeks looking at, I like to look at team and patterns. So what I did, I looked at and I call it the P/S, so PPR points per snap distributions. Use the old box and whisker, just looked across the different positions. Just want to see what's normal, what's abnormal the last 2 weeks. And Dennis, I'm not sure. I hadn't had time to go. I didn't have this much time. Go back to 2023 to compare. I should have, and maybe next year I'll be able to compare multiple years. But right now, so what I did then, I took the list of running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, and highlighted the top 20%, the ones that were scoring lots of points, touchdowns, catching a lot of yards and catch. I just top 20%. That's just kind of an extreme place here. And I colored that performance in light green. And then I looked at what players were consistent week 1 and 2. I love that consistency. It's another way. I don't know if this is real or not. So then I looked on, what players were declining, improving. And so what first 2 weeks, Dennis, there were only 3 tight ends in the top 20% by P/S in weeks 1 and 2. People are having trouble with tight ends. This is a sign there's only 3. That sounds low to me. 7 RBs, 10 WRs, Dennis. So I think there may be some surprises on the identity of some of these players. I think the tight ends, everybody kind of knows them, but maybe not. But anyway, here's the box and whiskers for the running backs. And I was just looking at what this is week 1, week 2. There was a lot more outliers in running backs, Dennis, week 2.
Wow.
Look at that. It was pretty smooth week 1. It was, you could catch them in one little area. It's kind of like you can set a bucket down and catch you can catch all the mice. All of a sudden you try the same trick week 2 and there's some outlier mice. They're gone. You didn't catch them. They're outliers. There were like 5 or 6 outliers compared to week 1. So that's interesting. And then here are the different players. And I did the average. And then week 1, week 2, PPR per snaps. I should have sorted by high to low, but I didn't. I just did it by alphabetical. And you can see that there's some players, and I'll circle back to the ones that were consistent. Our friend Alpha Kamara's one, 1.9,
Oh,
1.19. Goodness, that is boss number there.
Woo!
Look at Braylon Allen Jets, 0.98. Boy, is he on the wrong team. Imagine him in Dallas. Whoo! Anyway, tight ends. Week 2, week 1, notice the scale, 0.06. Notice the scale here, 1.06 between running backs, tight ends.
Wow.
So there's lean times. Remember when you see a graph, Dennis, we always look at the scales. And if I would put it on scale, these boxes would be extra thin. Be like how thin you cut the turkey when you got in-laws you don't like. You carve the turkey real thin, paper thin, so that they don't come back next year. That Dennis, he never feeds me at the Thanksgiving. He gives me those little wafer thin turkeys, right? That's how you do that. That's a Southern tip. Your popularity in the family is how big that slice off the turkey is, Dennis. If it's thin, it's telling, what did I do this year? Is Dennis pissed off at me? He gave me this thin slice. Anyway, that's just a little Southern culture, Dennis. I'm trying to educate you, Dennis.
Oh,
yeah, you love that.
Anyway, I gotta break in here,
okay,
Professor, because your thin slicing
mm-hmm.
brought back a wonderful memory from my past.
Okay,
so you might find this hard to believe, but when my brother and I get together, and my brother's a bigger wise ass than I am.
Oh my God!
When we get together to host, when we get together to host an event, we can be full trouble. So at my mom's birthday party, her 69th birthday party, we did like a "This Is Your Life" thing, and we brought in food for everybody, but the number of people that showed up was astounding. They all loved my mom, which was understanding.
How did that happen,
we didn't
Dennis? That love missed
Oh,
her son here. What's
it
going
skipped a
on?
generation with me, and my grandkids will get it. But no, here's the thing: we jokingly said at this party about how many people showed up. Remember, folks, when you go through the buffet line, one piece of chicken. And then we said, we're just kidding. Eat all you want. We had chicken left over because people really listened and they didn't get the joke. So at my mom's memorial, we of course had chicken to cater this meal, and we had to specify. Of course, again, she wanted, one of the things she wanted was, she didn't want a funeral. She wanted a party, just like your 69th birthday party, with my brother and I hosting it, celebrating all the great things she did in life. And so, of course, at that event, we said, please, 5 pieces of chicken each, 5. We don't want so many leftovers this time. And of course, people didn't enjoy the humor that way either. But the whole tale is, yes, I've had problems with slicing the turkey too thin.
Okay, so thin sliced turkey, just kind of like the tight ends have been thinly slicing. They've been sliced and diced on our teams. And then finally, wide receivers. Notice the scale back up to 1.6. Week 1 and 2 didn't look that interesting to me. They look about the same. There's outliers. So as I looked, it looked like the running backs really came on if you had some good running backs. So I would predict if you had some of these outliers, maybe your team is looking stronger than it might be. I don't know. Whereas your tight ends, boy, everybody's cut thin there. So hopefully that will change. But you're running wide receivers, which is probably not surprising. We kind of that better than zero, that stud WR, it looks like that held, Dennis. This is just me looking at the overall trends. And then the names of, and then here's the names of the people. So over down here, this is the master list. I'm going to stop there, let you peruse it. And people, if you're on our secret video recording that I post for the podcast, you guys are enjoying the actual video here. And this article's up, so the hard copy's there. But look at the RBs, Dennis. There's a lot of the usual. I love James Conner there. Do we love him or what? Dobbins, A-Chain, Montgomery, Hall, Kamara. Love Kamara. You and I were all over Conner and Kamara. Probably not so much on Madison. To me, he's the surprise for me. Notice the tight ends: Bauer, Grosicki, McBride. So believe it or not, and I'm actually going to pick up. So I've picked up as much Grosicki and all, because it looks like I could actually split out. Looks like Burrow's been relying on his tight ends, almost both of them. If Grosicki wasn't available, I've been grabbing all, just because I like to see tight ends, especially 2 tight ends on the team, getting usage. That doesn't happen a lot. And if something happened to Grosicki, then you've got the rookie that's showing he can do well. So, and Dennis tipped me on to this guy in best ball and whatnot. So I've been hoarding and foraging him as my tight end 3, as well as Grosicki, but not as much as if I would have known this, I would have grabbed a lot more. So wide receivers: Pierce, Lamb, Godwin, Cup. Too bad, we knew you. Samuel, Jalen Naylor, there's a surprise. Jefferson. So 2 players on Minnesota are in this elite consistency week 1 and 2. Shakir, Rashee Rice, and Rashid Shaheed. So that's it. That is the players, Dennis, that have done us right weeks 1 and 2.
I love this way of looking at the data, Professor, but I will point out one thing that does concern me. Because we're looking at
2 data points. Come on, Dennis.
We're looking at PPR. Well, we're looking, it's even different than that. We're looking at PPR points. Yeah. I'm wondering how much scoring a touchdown can skew this.
We
for,
could
for
figure out that.
yeah,
Maybe
for a
not
player
this
like
year, but
Madison who is not consistent. Yeah, for a player like Madison who's not getting a consistent number of snaps, if
right.
he has a game like he had 2 games where he scored a touchdown each of the first 2 weeks,
Yep.
but he played many fewer snaps week 2 than he did week 1 because of
Who's
game script.
who's he competed against?
Zamir White.
So
So it's
how I would take this data, folks, is if he's out there and you got a deep bench, he's a good stash, right? If something happens to
oh yeah,
break him.
and he's a great player to put in there, especially if you're looking at a defensive matchup against the running game that
Yeah.
says they're going to be passing more. Then Madison is a heck of a pick. One thing I love in this data, though, Professor, is that it picks up these guys that might have floated under the radar otherwise. And one guy specifically is Jalen Naylor. He's
Yep.
a guy that I really liked after week 1, not because I was, oh God, this guy's fabulous. It's because opportunities
Yes.
were arising.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a second or third wide receiver on the Vikings who was really stepping up with injury issues being the case. And Naylor was healthy and he was getting some snaps. And it's cool to see him pop up on this chart. When I look at this chart, I'm looking at players in 2 different ways. So, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I'm looking at the guys who get the majority of the snaps, and I'm looking at their averages, and then I'm looking at the averages of the rest of the players. And that way, for instance, Gesicki's getting fewer snaps than McBride and Bowers, who are getting the majority of the snaps on their team. But that doesn't mean you don't like Gesicki because of that. What it tells you is understand there's going to be a little more variability to Gesicki going forward if he's not getting all the snaps, because you have a chance that touchdown or that big play could really change and skew the results. Because he is getting fewer snaps, his PPR points per snap are more skewed by one big event, by one really good event. So when I look at players, I'll look at them in 2 classes. I'll look at Kamara, Hall, Montgomery, Shane, all of the wide running backs who are getting the majority of the snaps, or over 60% of the snaps on their team. And then I'll look at the guys like Madison who are getting less than 40% of the snaps. And that way I've got these 2 bundles of players to compare and be there with those comparisons.
And Dennis, I have all the data if you want to track your favorite players and that kind. Look at Tutu Atwell. Nothing week 1, everybody's held, and then week 2, Rutrow, he's up. So I think if I can have time to track this article, Dennis, and we're doing 3, 4, 5 weeks, we'll start seeing some of these kind of patterns on these touchdown dependent players. And just maybe that another way to look at handcuff, folks. This is not, this is what happened. Okay, you can't argue with the facts. This is what does that mean is where the argument, the moving forward, right? And so this is just another mechanism for you guys to wake up. In case you didn't realize, Gesicki was, just another guy. Just let you know, it's been real thin and tied in. There's only 3, and he shows up on that list. That gets my attention. Okay, that doesn't mean I risk half my fab to get him, but it means I need to pay attention to what's going on. So if nothing else, I like these snaps data, Dennis, to kind of wake me up to make sure because with 41 leagues I'm playing, I don't have time to dig so deep, and I'm good enough to, looking at the top down view of my teams that I'm catching. So, but I don't, that things like that can slip through. But Naylor, I've acquired shares of him cheaply after, believe it or not, week one, people still didn't believe. And I think there was the idea that Addison, right? That's the supposed number. People were you kind of cemented in to that thinking, and maybe you shouldn't be so stodgy and actually realize that there's opportunity. So he's a good one to have, especially if Jefferson gets injured again. Can you imagine Naylor, his production should even go up more? So that's how I use this data, is to inspire, the future thinking about these teams and these players and what's going on. So it dovetails into what you're talking about.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is week one, if you look at total snaps, Naylor 26 to 28 for Jordan Addison.
I don't know.
With Jordan Addison out,
yeah,
week two. Okay.
So can you see,
week two.
Dennis? I was going to pull up Minnesota. Can you see this, Minnesota?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Minnesota loves its wide receivers. So we're already with a team that is putting a lot of snap stock into its wide receivers. So that's the first level. And then we can look at wide receivers, and we can see that, Minnesota's about average, so that's good. But for them, that's, they're putting all their eggs, or a lot of their eggs, in the basket there. Then I can go to the player level, and then again, this is all on Science Fantasy. Here we go. 26. Look at 50. Wow.
Oh yeah.
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 And so
the way I look at that, and the way I look at that, Professor, is even when Jordan Addison comes back healthy, because Naylor is being productive, he's going to keep a role in that offense. So I love this data. This data, this PPR per snap data, is going to give us a look at players as they emerge this season with opportunities. So that's number one takeaway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the number one takeaway of this data. And number two takeaway of this data, Professor, is something that we have been preaching for a long time here on the Science of Fantasy Football. If you're looking at the statistics in the same way that other people are looking at the statistics, you're not going to gain an edge.
Nope.
But if you're looking at statistics that are significant, and PPR points per snaps, folks, this is legit data. This is a sign of what happened. Doesn't mean that it's going to be a sign of what happens weeks 3, 4, and 5. But when you look at this data, you see these players emerge as being significant players. The coaches notice this too.
Yeah,
and I'm not
asleep.
I'm not saying the coaches are looking at the professor's data and going, oh, I got to get Naylor in the game more because his PPR points per snaps. No, they have other ways of looking at the game. And they see a guy shining on tape, because for Naylor to be making this list with guys like CeeDee Lamb, Godwin, Kupp, Debo, his own teammate, Justin Jefferson, Shakir,
Rashee Rice,
guys that have had great starts to the season, that means Naylor is going to get more opportunities going forward, because you notice whose name is not on that list in week one, and it's Jordan Addison. So Jordan Addison did not make the list in week one when he was healthy and played the same number of snaps as Naylor. So when Addison was in the game, he did less with his opportunities than Jalen Naylor did. So this is huge. This is important data. Like I said, you got to look at it in the right window of understanding what this data is telling you, but it's telling you plenty.
That is so true. And let me now move to our game by game thing here. Our squirrel and husky. Dennis, I pulled up my PowerPoint. I will post this, folks, uh, with the podcast. We'll have our game by game material, my rankings, these kind of things. Let's see. So, Dennis, before we get squirrel and husky, is there anything about my uncertainty levels for week 3 or my power rankings, anything that we need to discuss? It's here, folks. You can look at it. I've discussed it on our previous podcast. Is there anything there that we need to touch on? I like to use these metrics to set the table, not to start the meal. Just put everything out there. See, if I'm going to dissect the frog, I want all my tools out there. I'm kind of like Dexter, Dennis. I unroll everything. I want, everything in its place. Okay. I really focus, I'm a microbiologist, Dennis, so nobody cares if I dissect a bacteria because you can't even see them. So, okay. I don't go, I'm too tender to dissect animals anymore. I don't even hunt anymore. I used to, because my grandmother loved squirrel and dumplings, Dennis. So I'd have to go out every fall because she was from Arkansas and lived in Louisiana. She had she called a hankering for squirrel and dumplings. So I'd have to go shoot her a old sweet squirrel, and I wasn't a big fan of the squirrel haunch, knowing I loved the dumplings and the juice was okay, so I would just eat the dumplings. She would eat the squirrel haunches and whatever parts of the squirrel she ate, you know. Dennis, I don't know. Anyway, as a
Hey,
young man, I don't
hey,
hunt
this
anymore unless I eat it. I will fish on occasion, but not hunt furry, sweet animals.
there you go. I agree with you there,
Okay.
and but the people that hunt,
Oh, it's
if you're
fine.
eating
I have
what
no
you
problem.
shoot, you're eating what you shoot. It's fine. If
Yeah.
you are hunting for the sake of hunting and you're not eating
Yeah, I'm not into
your
trophy
catch,
hunting. No, no, no.
I'm
We
not a
have
big
some
fan of that. Not a
serious
big fan of that.
Dennis out here. I mean, they have a processing plant right down the road from us, and they'll, add the pork with the deer meat and have deer sausage. I've had some. It's not my cup of tea, but if you cook it right and it's the gaminess is marinated out, it's okay. I mean, in a zombie apocalypse, I'm eating Bammy with the rest of them, but hey, times is
I'll,
tough when the
I'll,
zombies are
I'll be
coming.
hey, when all of society breaks down,
Yeah, we're
I
gonna eat
might
deer,
be asking you for grandma's squirrel and dumpling
squirrel
recipe.
and
I'm
dumplings. That's
I'm
right.
I'm all about staying alive when the
Yeah.
when all of society fails and I can't
Mm,
get my steaks over at Meyer.
yeah.
I might be
Yeah.
learning how to hunt myself to
That's
stay
right.
alive.
But
All
anyway,
right,
the
Professor.
uncertainty,
So
Dennis,
so
I've highlighted the so-called safer teams, whatever in quotes, and the so-called uncertain teams in red. So you can just get a feel for, daily fantasy or props, or just kind of realize that team, right? There's probably not a lot of surprises either way. And then my overall power rankings for just this week, not the season, just kind of you can see who's KC's number 2, Dennis. Baltimore's number 1, pretty close.
woohoo!
Detroit's up there, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Houston. Probably not a lot of surprises. Green Bay, Jordan Love, that's Tennessee, Rams. I mean, New England, boy, was I right on that? Wow, that was sad. The Jets were, what were the
Whew.
Jets? The Jets were, I can't even find the Jets. Jets
Out in the
were
middle.
way up there, above median.
Yep.
In Denver, Carolina, the Giants. So just be
Ugh.
cautious, especially in flexes, Dennis. I'm looking not to play some of these players unless they are just a stud muffin on that team. Hopkins, I'm looking to see, can he come back Tennessee? But right now, that Tennessee team's weak sauce by my rankings. But, so I would still think Hopkins is a little bit tricky to deal with. So anyway, you can use that as kind of a temperature, right? You take when you're cooking your turkey and go to cut it thin, you got to make sure 160, 70 degrees. You got to kill the listeria, Dennis. And I don't stuff my turkey because some people don't. You got to cook. I'm serious about the microbiology cooking. I have food thermometers every damn where. I don't play with pink chicken and turkey with listeria and salmonella. I don't play. Okay. Beef, hamburger, I don't play. Steak, okay, because you got one animal, that's the steak. With hamburger, it is takes one infected animal in the ground of all the other animals to make the patty. Big difference, folks. If you're going to gamble on the steak being a little rare, not the hamburger, right? If you're going to eat oysters, and boy, there are some badass viruses in raw oyster. Folks, they have a irradiation method. I don't know if they do it up north, but down south in New Orleans, you can get where they'll zap it with radiation to pretty much break down anything. Kind of a soft pasteurization, but it's irradiated. I don't even know if people don't care. I figure if they drink a beer and eat some horseradish, that'll kill everything. And there is truth that horseradish will stop bacteria growth, but not viruses. So be aware. Anyway, Dennis, that was some food message from the microbiologist here. Here are our squirrel or huskies here, Dennis. So squirrels, we got huskies, we got 4. We got a boatload of squirrels this week. 34 and a half, the ultimate mutated, ugly, crippled, mean squirrel game, Pittsburgh and the Chargers. So that's the worst of the week. The best husky, good boy, good dog, Detroit and Arizona. So we have a scale there. What do you want to start first? Bad squirrels and save the good huskies?
Well, before we jump into squirrels, go back to your power rankings for just
Dennis
a moment, because
I can't just wave some data at him and move on. It sticks in his head, and he's got to tell us about something that he noticed.
Yeah, so I spotted something here. Yes, I did.
Imagine that.
Two of the teams that I'm concerned about this weekend.
Okay.
Because they're going to have different running backs in your fantasy football lineup. Of course, Joe Mixon, a guy that we've been all over. And of course, Isaiah Pacheco, a guy that I was all over this year. You're bragging about Pacheco, bragging about Mixon.
They're saying 8 weeks. Is that true?
Yeah.
So do I need to keep him on my
I would keep
rosters?
Him. If you have an IR spot,
I don't.
You put him. If you don't have an IR spot, he's expendable if you absolutely need to grab somebody. Because remember,
it's tight ends this week, Dennis. It's crazy with Kittle being doubtful and Ingram and Dennis. That's what's getting me on some of my players I want to stash is I'm having to go find these streamable tight ends.
Yeah, and this is why I say it's okay if you're looking just for a week or two, because people are not going to gamble on grabbing Pacheco yet if they don't have an IR spot. Okay. They're probably going to let it go for a couple weeks. So you could probably get him back for $1 in FPPC
early
4 weeks from now and be fine. But yeah, I would hang on to not floating him, because that 8 weeks is kind of the maximum that I think he'll be missing. But so Pacheco and Mixon, 2 running backs that we're really high on. Hate to see great players get hurt. It just is awful. But fantasy football doesn't wait. It goes on. It's because of these power rankings. Casey at 2 and Houston at 6 that I say it's okay to roll the dice and to play Steele for the Chiefs this week and play Akers for Houston this week because they're going to get the first chance. I'd even toy with the idea of putting Pirine in my flex if I was desperate at running back this week, or if I was so desperate at running back that I had to plug and play Pirine as a starter. I'd be okay with that because I think Steele and Pirine are going to basically split what Pacheco is doing. So, but the fact that both teams are so high on your power rankings has me starting the backup running backs with some level of confidence, even though I'm not all that high on Cam Akers as a player.
Yeah.
You know, he's not the player he once was pre-injury. He's still going to get you the volume needed to get you 10 to 12 points. And that'll keep you in the running. Notice I say 10 to 12 is about the upside that I would expect from Cam Akers. We were getting 14 to 18 on the upside for Joe Mixon. But the fact that Houston is such a good team, I still think you've got that upside of double digits for Akers. And his low side is probably 7-8 points because of that, how good that offense is. So he's a safe player. Steele is a little bit more of a risky play. Pirine is a little bit more of a risky play until we see how their usage is going to go. And then they're risky for longer term because we don't know how Kareem Hunt is going to come around and to factor into that offense. It's very possible that the Chiefs could use a 3-headed monster at running back once Kareem Hunt is ready and in game shape. So there's the problem. It's never a 1-for-1 when you replace a guy. When Pacheco goes out, who is getting a high percentage of the snaps, it doesn't mean the next man up is going to automatically get the same upside in snaps. And so you have to look at that player, 50% replacement for Kansas City, and for Houston, maybe a 70% because there's less on the bench. The only other guy on the bench is Dare Ogunabowale for Houston Texans. So I'm not worried about Akers losing significant snaps to Dare Ogunabowale. But, you know, you got to go into this with a different mindset. Now, if KC and Houston, instead of being KC and Houston, were Tennessee and Carolina, I look at it a whole different place. I don't want the backup running back in those circumstances because we saw what a great running back like Ramondre Stevenson did on Thursday night against a great defense. It's because New England's in the bottom 6 of this power ranking that we were able to see such a lousy game from such a great running back in Stevenson. You can shut down one player in the NFL. And then if the other team doesn't have player 2 and 3 step up, and with New England, they don't have player 2 and 3. That's why they're in the bottom 6 of this power ranking. This is how I look at using this power rankings to gain an advantage against my fantasy football opponents.
Nice.
All right, on to the squirrels. Very annoying squirrels. And by the way, there were some very annoying squirrels in the state of Tennessee, I must say. And they had different shaped feet, Professor, than the flatland squirrel does.
They got claws to go get the acorns and whatnot. Yep. Different.
Yeah, but
they have out west, they have some that are like tufted. They have little furry extensions on their ears and they look cuter. But squirrels will bite, folks, so they're not pets.
No.
Just you know, you don't pick up a
Lear-
raccoon and pet it. Come on, folks. Anyway,
There you go. So the squirreliest
do
of the
you want to
squirrel game
do? Do you want to do
is
Pittsburgh?
let's do Pittsburgh
Oh
and
my
the
goodness.
LA Chargers. It is the squirreliest of the squirrel games this week.
Boy, it is Tennessee. Let's see, 5. Let's see, where are you? Right here. Here we go. So,
It,
yeah, go ahead. I was just going to do the
it's
Vegas.
crazy that
Yeah. Oh, it is.
yes, yeah, it's crazy though when you look at this that this is the squirreliest of the squirrel games, and both teams come into this game 2-0.
Yeah, I don't. The Vegas is Vegas. Pittsburgh 20, Chargers 14, 3-point spread 34. So basically, it's a very defensive kind of situation. Is Herbert going to play? I haven't heard the latest, but Vegas is thinking maybe he's wounded. I don't know. Daps. Well, let's talk about Pittsburgh's. Is the favorite. They're playing at home, and they like to pass at home. They don't like to run as much. That's interesting. Chargers, they're the dog away, and they pass a little more. They rush less. So both teams projected actually to not do a lot of rushing, but do a little bit more passing. When I say more, 7 versus 5%. So we could argue really not much of anything, but just for those that have needs in the flex, just be aware. There's you know, this again, this is 2023 data. So the DAPS Pittsburgh, it's all good except the kicker. You even want to play the Pittsburgh D. I think I'm gonna worry about the kicker. I've got other options, but it looks like they should be able to rush and pass by these DAPs. Again, this is from last year. Chargers, on the other hand, very tough against Herbert. The only good news is there's a rushing potential and the tight end for the Chargers. So, and the kicker. So this would suggest they need to rush. The home away split says they don't like to rush. So I always wonder, Dennis, and I haven't charted this data, when the DAPs say one thing, but the tendency is another, what wins out? And I mean, Vegas would say that if they rush, it's not going to work, and if they pass, it's not going to work. I mean, Vegas is down on both of those arms, but the DAPS would say there may be some activity in the rushing, you know, and maybe the tight end.
Very interesting look at the data here, Professor. And Herbert, high ankle sprain, that is usually not a good thing for a quarterback, especially when it's his right ankle that he has to, plant to throw with. So I'm a little bit worried, even if he plays, that Justin Herbert will not be at his full strength, which really puts this game into Pittsburgh's edge of making this an ugly defensive match.
Yep. And that's how Vegas sees it, Dennis. I mean, I can't say more than that. If you're curious of the rankings, I've got them ranked. Freiermuth 71 is the best player as far as ranking, and that's 71 is tied in 2-1 streamer, maybe. Harris is 54. That's tied in RB 2-3 type. Nothing here is inspiring me other than their defense at a 79, really. And Freiermuth, because we just got to have some pulse on our tight end this week. Pickens at 50, he's W3,
Yeah.
4. I'm underwhelmed by that this week. Chargers, boy, I know everybody's Quentin Johnson. I just don't see these rankings here. Dobbins, I do like, and I think he's a good 2-3 type, even though Their tendency is not to rush. I think they're going to have to game plan for Dobbins to rush more. They're going to have to break their trend. And the DAPs would say that is the way they should do it. Herbert, sad. Dickerson, we love that kicker. And I think I had, if you're a kicker, yep. So kicker's interesting. The defense is 50, that's average. And Pittsburgh, yeah, I think with Herbert, that's probably overstating their D because I think it could be a horror show passing Dennis, and I think Dobbins could, if they'll use him early and keep up, then that might help. But if he gets stuffed a lot early and Herbert has to pass, it could be the beginning of the end. Hayden Hurst, tight end 3, got an opportunity, but I wouldn't play him.
Yeah, and especially if Herbert's out, it's going to get even tougher to like anybody on this offense for the Chargers. And a lot of folks have been riding 2 good weeks out of J.K. Dobbins to start the season. He might come back down to earth with the entire Chargers offense. Spread is still at -3. Favored of Pittsburgh at home. I would lay those points. And believe it or not, Professor, even though this is one of the lowest spreads we've ever seen at 34.5, because of how bad over under of 34.5, I still like the under on this game. I just think this is going to be a messy.
It could be a horror show. Could be 20-0, Dennis. It could be a horror show. 20-3. Could be a Jets, New England kind of situation.
I could see it being even uglier than that, Professor. I could see this being like a 16-9 advantage or 16-10 to the Steelers and see the points in the 20s. That's how ugly I could see this game. So I would be looking elsewhere for fantasy starters. Obviously, you're probably end up playing J.K. Dobbins if he's in your lineup. And if you have Najee Harris, you're probably playing him, but I would look elsewhere and hope you drafted looking elsewhere this year. The other one of the squirrel games I think we should talk about, because there's some interesting decisions. Now, there's interesting decisions to make here. Let's look at Packers and the Titans.
Packers and the Titans, number 6. Okay, well, I can just go right. I label these here. Tennessee Pie. Okay, so Vegas 2.5, so it's close. 21-16, so 21-17 roughly. 38.5. That's still not great, Dennis, but it is what it is. Tennessee is at home. They love to rush at home. They want to run it down the Green Bay's throats. Green Bay away loves to rush as well. This game seems to be rush driven here, Dennis, by the trends. And I wondered if that's some of what's keeping this game a little under the lid of about 42. Daps, Tennessee, looks like it's all good for the passing. If they can get some passing, the tight end Chiggy, there's an opportunity there. I wouldn't play the Tennessee D here, but everybody else. And the RB, Pollard has been pretty good for his ADP that you got. So I'm not necessarily jumping off Pollard. He's probably a flex RB if I can't find somebody else. Green Bay looks like it's all gravy for rushing and passing. And if we get Jordan Love, is Jordan Love going to play? If he comes, then that's good. And the tight end, though, Kraft, going to have to earn his biscuits, and you could play the defense for Green Bay a lot there, and the kicker as well looks really extra easy for the kicker. So looks like the more dynamic is actually Green Bay by the DAPs, Dennis. Vegas doesn't see it that way.
Yeah, and I do see it that way because I like Green Bay plus 2.5, and that's it. And I'm anticipating Jordan Love will not play.
Oh,
And
yeah,
I
okay. Yeah.
still like Green Bay plus 2.5 because I just don't
That just
have any
kills my
faith.
my read shares, though.
Yeah, just don't. Yes, it does. But the good news is I think Jordan Love is back next week, so
Okay.
we get to
And
see.
it was Jacobs for Green Bay. I like that. That's a RB2-3 type, but high. In other words, it could be much more or much less. So that's why I put him under the high uncertainty. But it's not bad. It's a good flex RB this week. But just realize we don't know what we're getting there. The defense is 50, Dennis. It's Tennessee, their defense about 48, about the same. Love Pollard, same kind of situation, 70. So he's almost the same as Jacobs, a flex RB if you can't find somebody else. 38, 36 for Chiggy. I do like Chiggy. Green Bay, yeah, Kraft is 40. Chiggy said, yeah, I may be a little under there. Ridley, 50. That's a 3-4 type. Hopkins, I'm probably conservative, but Levis has been sad. And I wish he was not sad so that my Boyd's best ball shares would resurrect from the dead here. I need some resurrection here in this game.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see as the season goes on more out of Hopkins, but this week I would be very, very conservative. I do like the Packers plus 2.5. I do think this will be a higher scoring game. I think that Green Bay will manage to score more. Remember, folks, week 1, Tennessee got beat by Chicago, and Caleb Williams threw for less than 100 yards. I mean, he was just awful. So I'm not worried about Malik Willis and Green Bay. Malik Willis didn't look awful last week. So, no, he didn't look like a world beater either, folks, but he didn't look awful. He looked competent, and I think you will see him this week perform as well as he did last week, and that'll be good enough for Green Bay to take this game. I agree with your numbers, Professor. Jacobs and Pollard are the only guys to consider really starting. If you have to dip into the wide receivers for either team this week, you're probably not in a great situation. Jaden Reed and Calvin Ridley, the slight choices for each team. If you got to dip down into Hopkins, you're in real tough times.
You're rolling the dice.
Yeah. Yes.
Rolling
Enough of it's so much uncertainty on that team until Levis starts to throw a little bit better. All right. Enough of the Squirrels. Let's go to some of the Husky games. How about the Eagles and Saints? The Saints, the most surprising team offensively for me, Professor. I expected Kamara to be good. I expected Kamara to be good. I did not expect Carr to be as good as we've seen from him. He has been a dynamic quarterback.
He had winded as a Saints fan, long-suffering fan from the 70s. The Aints been through all of it for was that 70s, 80s? Dennis, it's a long time. Been fans of the Saints. Grew up. And in fact, here's a diatribe you didn't even know. Down in Shreveport, where I was going to school, the local sports channel, the ABC, they would always try to show Dallas because they were America's team, and they would, poo-poo New Orleans. And so we finally everybody wrote in editorials every week to the Shreveport Times and complained. So finally they did every other week. They would show New Orleans for a while. Then everybody was cranky, but the bars made a lot of money because they would showcase the other team and drinks. Come on down, Dallas is not on TV here, you can go watch them here. So they would actually make money. But can you imagine being in the state of Illinois and not showing Chicago, but yet in New Orleans,
Oh boy.
in Louisiana, you're not showing the Saints 24/7. Come on. Anyway, I grew up and very angry against the Cowboys nation. Okay. They weren't my team. My team was the Saints. And I know y'all laughed and poo-pooed on them and figuratively and whatnot, but it was bad. We would, and the argument was, well, Shreveport's close to Texas, and we got people listening over there, and they want to see Texas and New Orleans. Come on, it's Shreveport, Louisiana. I don't know if I probably don't have this problem anymore, but in the old days when we had, a clicker for our TV, right, and 3 channels, we were damn happy to watch any football anytime. But I hated the Cowboys because I missed my Saints. So anyway, that was that thing. So New Orleans 27, Philadelphia 22, 2.5. So it's low, could be anybody's. 49.5. Dennis, that's a nice shootout kind of game. New Orleans is at home. They like to pass at home, and with Shaheed and whatnot, that's good. Philadelphia away, they like to pass at away. So Devontae Smith is good. So I think those trends support Vegas's view of the shootout to me, Dennis. Daps, it says passing all day long for New Orleans. Kamara, you're going to have to earn your biscuit. Maybe you'll earn it out of the backfield catching about 2 or 3 touchdowns. I'm ready. I need 3 touchdowns. I'm greedy, Dennis. I want lots of touchdowns. I wouldn't play the D or the Saints kicker this week. And Philadelphia, it's all about the passing. And Goddard has a great matchup, and the kicker, great matchup. I wouldn't play the Philadelphia D against Saints. They could whoop up on them. And rushing looks good for Philadelphia as well. So it stacks up, lots of action. And the Daps it's not something that I'm worried about. That I think Vegas is I don't know how Philly could win, but I think it's going to be lots of scoring, and we all like that. We like 60-60 in overtimes, and triple overtime. That's what we want. Lots of points.
Yeah, and I think this will be a high scoring game, and I'm very interested to look at your player breakdown for
Oh,
both New
sure, I can
Orleans
do
and
that. Yeah,
Philadelphia.
New Orleans, Kamara's 86. Like the kicker, we'll see. Carr is a QB2 this. I know a lot of people went up. Dennis, I don't know, not sold yet, but to me, I think Kamara, my rankings say Kamara leads the way again. This, if Saints are able to keep up and beat them, it'll be Kamara. Taysom Hill, depends on your league. He's a tight end. Could be a poor man's quarterback on occasion. Olave, I like. Shaheed, I like. Those are WR3s. I know Shaheed's been getting his say, and but I don't know, Dennis. I'm probably a little bit more pessimistic this week. 50 to me is a WR3. Olave's a little bit high WR3, low WR2. I'm like I said, my rankings seem to suggest it's Kamara leads the way here. For Philly, Saquon Barkley all day long, mail it in, 91.
Oh yeah.
Hurts is going to rush in too. Hurts Barkley's numbers, because I always think Barkley won't get his 3 touchdowns like Kamara did, because Carr's not going to run it in, but Hurts could. Goddard, 69. As tough as this landscape is, that ranking's probably low, and he's probably a bottom end tight end 1 this week. And I'd play him. And Devonta Smith should be a good tight end 2, 3 type. There's a lot of mouths to feed. Dotson, Brown, I think, is out. I ranked him. I wasn't sure, but I think he's out. And the only other one that's interesting, just snap-wise, Britton. Covey, and snap
Yes.
wise got a little tension and some scoring. I'm just going to put a little prop there. Looking at what he's doing there, that may be something. Gainwell, I wouldn't play any of those other guys. I wouldn't play the defense either. Kicker, I like for Philly.
So very, very, very interesting. First of all, in Philadelphia, Barkley and Goddard and Smith are must starts for me this week, along with Jalen Hurts. I do think that's where the offense is all going through with A.J. Brown out. I do expect New Orleans to slow them down a little bit, even though the defense matchups are suggesting some easier goes.
But then this
I
is
think
from
this New Orleans
2023.
defense is
Yeah.
Yep, this New Orleans defense is much, much better. I'm interested to see pop up the depths again. I want to see New Orleans face a tight end, see above average on the tight end against Philly's defense. And I think Philadelphia's defense is worse than they were at the end of last year. If you are without a tight end this week,
Jawan
okay,
Johnson.
no. Foster Moreau, if he is healthy.
What? Okay.
Foster Moreau.
I didn't even link him. Come on, Dennis. Yeah, I know.
Foster
He got some
Moreau
action. I know.
Is going to get some action this week if he is healthy. And he could be that little surprise guy for you. If you're without a tight end and everything else has been picked over on waivers, he's got the matchup and he probably will get some red zone looks. He is a guy that I really think has an opportunity. Last week, shutout. Didn't get a single target, didn't get a single reception, played 80% of the snaps. Week 1, played 77% of the snaps, had 40 yards and 4 catches and a touchdown. I'm thinking this is an easy defensive matchup, similar to what he had week 1, and that was Carolina. Last week was against Dallas. That was a lot tougher defense against the tight end, and he got shut out. I didn't have him in my lineup last week. Had him in a few lineups week 1 where I needed a streaming tight end. This is another streaming tight end option for Foster Moreau if he's healthy. He has a questionable tag coming into the game, so watch that before game time and see. But he's a guy that I like a lot better this week than consensus, and we'll give you that little surprise pick.
It's a surprise to me.
As far as the game goes, I like the Saints to go 3-0. I'll spot the 2.5, and I like the over on this. I think it is going to be a very husky game for fantasy football.
Good. Okay, who's next?
Let's look at the last of the games for the week, and it is the huskiest of the. Let's look at the Detroit Lions and the Arizona Cardinals. This will not only be, I think, a high-scoring game, but I think it'll be a very close game as well. Boy, I'm telling you, I'm not sure which way to go yet on this.
Detroit, 28, Arizona, 23, 2.5 points, over under 51. That is a low spread, Dennis, again, and that means something in our metrics a little bit. Just be aware. As far as home away, Detroit being away, they don't like to pass. They like to rush more. So they're going to want to do Gibbs, and Sun God probably will get his, but I don't know past him if there's any gravy left for everybody talking Laporta this week. I worry. And I'll just jump to the Daps. Gibbs, Montgomery, all gravy, and Laporta has an interesting situation. It looks favorable, but I hate the Detroit away, Dennis. I'm still remembering last year. Those I know but okay. So Arizona home, they rush about the same. So Connor's going to be Connor, and they'll tend to pass less. So I think Murray's going to be a loose cannon and run a little bit more. Arizona, look at the rushing for Connor. He's gonna have to go into the against the Saints tough, and McBride tough. It looks like the passing is favored if you're Arizona, and you're gonna have to earn your biscuits with RBs and tight ends. And if we look at I have Connor down a little bit because of that DAP 72. That's a low RB2 for the week. He's probably got to start him. I love McBride. Don't love that DAP. So I'm confused about that, but I mean, with the landscape, what you going to do? You got to play him. Murray, I really like Murray. I think he's going to have some legs. Kicker's okay. Defense is weak sauce, and there's the Achilles heel for Arizona, I think, is that's what's going to allow New Orleans to beat them. Harrison, 76, his WR2. You know, I've got him as a low, but last week was so dramatic. This ranking is looking at weeks 1 and 2. And so, if I only use 2, then this would be, 86, 90s, but he had 1 too. So I don't know, with 2 weeks, was 2 the normal, or was 1 the normal, or is the normal somewhere between, or skewed one way? So that ranking is still a little bit nebulous, Dennis. And Detroit, I love Sun God. Of course we do. Jameson Williams, he's a WR4 this week. I know he's been doing well. WR4. Laporta, 93. It's so bad with tight ends. You got to play him even though he's got issue. And I love Gibbs is a 2 and Montgomery is a 3. I like all that. And Goff, I've only got as a QB2 this week, Dennis. I know I worry about Goff's passing yards, and I like the kicker. I don't like the D. It looks like weak D on both, and that's allowing all these other players to come forth.
This is a very tough game to handicap, and I've kind of gone all around on this game this week. I was originally figuring I'd take the Lions. The thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is last week we saw the Cardinals absolutely manhandle the Los Angeles Rams. I didn't think the Rams had a great defense, but I thought they had a better defense than what we saw. And even in defeat week 1, Arizona put 28 points up on the Buffalo Bills, who I think have a better defense than Detroit. So I really think this Arizona offense is really, really, really strong this year. I'm taking the upset. I'm taking Arizona +3 at home. I know Goff's playing indoors, so we shouldn't have to worry about the home and away splits.
I am.
But I'm also concerned about that. I do think this is going to be a high scoring game, though. Even though the 51.5 is a huge number, I think we could be over that. I wouldn't be surprised to see the winning team in this game have to score mid-30s in order to win it. And I think it will be a tough, close game. So I'm looking at this game to light them up. And, Kyler Murray, I know Connor has a tough matchup. I know that McBride has a tough matchup. Maybe this is the week we get to see Kyler Murray just turn it on again. Like he did last week. He was very effective in blowing out the Rams, and he looked good week 1, putting up a lot of points. This team has put up 69 points in 2 games in a year in which the offense is way down. It's just crazy that they have been one of the better offenses this year. So I'm going to pick the upset. I'm going to take Arizona in the 3. And as far as playing your your typical players, you're lining them all up in this game. I don't care what the defensive matchups, if they're tough or not. You're playing Connor, you're playing McBride, you're playing Harrison, for Arizona. On the Detroit side, you're playing both running backs. Yeah, I'd probably have Goff in that lineup unless I've got somebody else in the top 10 that's also on my roster. And as far as the wide receivers, I'm never benching the Sun God.
No, I wouldn't.
Never benching the Sun God. I agree with you. I think Laporta might have another tough game this week, despite the matchups here. What they're saying, I think Arizona might be a little bit better than what we have seen in the past from them defensively. Always tough with these teams that have had some changes to see what those changes will mean when they get on the field. And this is a week that I think Arizona could pull off the upset.
I'm going to be watching this game. I'm going to be cautious, but as you say, if I've got Laporta, I've got McBride, you got to play them. I mean, you got to play all the studs here. There's nothing in this game says I should sit anybody. I just make note that your floor ceiling, Dennis, may not be what you think it is on like the tight ends and that kind of thing. But then again, this landscape, I'll take 10 to 12 points from a tight end with nothing else out there. And it's time for Kelsey to wake up. Can I just put that play? I don't know what I need to call Taylor up and say, look, you need to do something here. Okay. I don't know, write a song about him being a flop or something. I don't know, whatever it takes. We need to fire that boy up. I need some points. I need some touchdowns. Him and Mahomes.
And here's the good news.
Okay.
With the bad news of losing Pacheco.
Yeah.
I think the Chiefs are going to have to throw a lot more to win.
Yeah.
And I think they can lean on that quarterback Mahomes to get it done. And that means
why don't we go
Kelsey,
over that game after the show, Dennis? Why don't we dig into that? You have a little time to do after the show?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we shut the podcast here, and then the video will have the after the show looking at Chiefs in Atlanta.
I love it. So head on over to scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You can check out all of the great articles and data by the professor. I'm telling you, folks, PPR points per snap is going to get my attention and should get your attention. And then, of course, head on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks. Woo. Another great long Saturday podcast. Dennis, it's 12:40. Damn. We keep going. Anyway, this is After Show hosted by your professor, friendly neighborhood professor. Feel like Spider-Man there. And let's do the Chief. Yeah, you like, see, in the old days, we were happy with just the silly Marvel cartoons. It used to be on the Bozo show out of Little Rock.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd rush home from school and could watch the cartoons. That and Dark Shadows. I had to watch the vampires, Dark Shadow, and then hopefully catch a Spider-Man cartoon back in the day. Friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Here is KC at Atlanta. Dennis loves the KC fandom. Apparently the Hall of Fame does too. That's all I saw in there. I felt like I should be given an honorary KC rib and walk around and enjoy the KC highlights. They should have done that. Just here's the barbecue. Come on over here. This is the KC Hall of Fame, and we're just going to call it the all over Hall of Fame. But anyway, it was, like I said, Drew Brees' his stuff, but memorabilia was in the broom closet in the back. I did find that. Saints fans open here. And they tricked you, Dennis. They had the bathroom and then the real broom closet. They had the Saints. See, they try to trick you. The Saints are always in the toilet every year. Come on, Hall of Fame, do better. Okay. So 26-20. Over Atlanta, they sure woke up last week. I just don't know if it was a product of Philly folding or looking past them. I don't know
Oh,
what that was. They should got their butts chewed. Philly should. Over under 46. It could be up to 48. It could be a Husky like time it said the -3 spread. So they think it's close anyway. I think if Pacheco was there, Dennis, I think the spread would be
oh yeah.
higher and I think the over under would be higher. So I think there's a little bit of penalty Vegas is put on KC. KC, it shows that Mahomes and Kelsey, look at that, above average. Get me my 2 touchdowns I've been needing. Okay. Uh, Carson Steele, Dennis, if he can do 12 points against this tough situation, I would love to see. I got him in 24, actually more now. I picked him up for nothing. People still not believing, and that's fine. They all went to Kareem Hunt. I'll worry about Kareem Hunt later. And you couldn't fight with tons of fab to get him. I'll take Steele at $1, and I've drafted him before. So I was quite happy. I hope he gets me something. But his tough deal, the kicker, come on, Bucker, let's go. I wouldn't use the KCD. Atlanta, maybe. The KC's been turning it over more than they should, so Atlanta D is interesting. It shows Bijan Robinson feast all day long. I don't think it's enough feast to beat KC, but that's how Vegas, I think, uh, is seeing that that's their advantage. Everything else is tough, tough. Kansas City has a rough defense. KC away, they like to pass, don't like to rush, and that's exactly what they should do. Atlanta home, they like to pass and rush, so they got a choice. They'll be going Bijan and maybe then sneaking in some Mooney or London or something. Love Bijan 99. I just know he has high uncertainty because his floor and ceiling is pretty broad this week. Love the kicker, but I think I don't know if he's got a good, yeah, he's got a tough D, so it's too bad. Uh, Defense, he could surprise them, but I don't know. I didn't rank him too high. Pitts, Dennis, you got to play him, but boy, I did, Dennis, I'm gonna admit, 41 leagues, I have no Pitts. I'm not Pitts about Pitts because I just went elsewhere. Drake London's WR3 type seems reasonable. That's about all I see. Cousins 30, he's a QB2, 3 in Superflex. I'm skeptical of what I saw last week from Cousins. KC, love the D, love Butker. Look at 94, Dennis. So I really think he's going to deliver. Holmes is QB1 low. We need more out of him than we've been getting. P. Ryan and Steele, I got P. Ryan over just because I think the DAPs are going to put passing, and I think P. Ryan will collect a few more points than Steele. I'm just the way it wound up. Love Kelsey, high uncertainty, Dennis. We need Kelsey bad. Rasheed Rice, love him all day long. WR2, play him if you got him. Worthy, roll the dice in your flex if you wanna on that. And Atlanta, I think I've already done Atlanta. Yeah. So there we go. What you think, Dennis?
Yeah, obviously, my fandom hat comes into play here, so folks will not believe what I have to say. But yeah, it's you taking KC all day long against Atlanta. How Atlanta managed to upset Philadelphia last week is beyond me. I do like the under on this game, though.
Really?
Yeah, not
Is
strong
it
enough to play it.
because Atlanta doesn't hit that 20? Is that the concept?
I think so. I think
Okay.
so. And I
Okay.
think we're going to look at maybe, you know, 24 will do it for Kansas City. I do expect Mahomes to have a much better game. but I just don't think this is going to be a huge scoring day for either team. I think the defenses hold. I agree. You got to obviously be playing Mahomes all day long.
And Kelsey. You can't walk
Kelsey
away
all
from
day long.
Kelsey. Yeah.
No. And I liked your strategy there. If as I said earlier, if you got Steele, you're playing Steele. Okay.
Yes.
If you
Yeah.
need
In the
need a
flex.
running back,
In the flex, Dennis.
I would not even be against playing
P
both
Ryan in the
Steele
flex.
and P Ryan together
If
this
you have
week
two
because
flexes, I could.
I
Who
could see
knows?
that. With all of the injuries, I could see that. If everybody was healthy, if you had Mixon in games, and yet, yeah, you're not doing something crazy like
Well,
that.
the DAPs are tough though, so I think the
depths are tough.
passing is going to be. That's why I rank P Ryan higher a little bit. I just thought you could get more bang for your buck, and I don't know the props on him, folks. If I was looking, there may be. I mean, I'm not betting it. I'm just saying you might check the props on P Ryan. That may be sliding under the window, under the
Yeah,
radar.
P Ryan is a heck of a bet this week on
It's
his
interesting.
props. Yeah, he's only 16
Two?
and a half yards receiving.
Oh
16
man,
and a half
that seems
yards
low
receiving.
to me.
You gotta take that all day. How about this on Kelsey? Kelsey's prop is all the way down to 47 and a half.
Boy,
But
that
here's
seems,
how
yeah, that seems juicy.
yeah, here's how Vegas is very smart though, Professor, because they will not let you play the over on Patrick Mahomes and the over on the yards for Kelsey.
Come on
They
now.
understand those.
Come on.
They understand those two
I
are
could do
so
Dennis.
tightly
I could
linked.
do that. I could
In a
play
parlay.
that.
In a parlay, you can't
in
do
a
it.
parlay. Gotcha.
In a parlay, they're blocking you out of that.
Come on.
That combination on sleeper. It's terrible. I thought we were a civilized country. We should be allowing that. But anyway, that just shows how low the props are on all three players. But yeah, P Ryan, that
That's
over.
interesting.
I'm playing the over prop on him. I'm playing the over. I'm going to combine him with Kelsey.
That's
and
interesting.
And go with that. But yeah, that'll be the way I play it this week.
As a Saints fan, we always enjoy Atlanta, the Dirty Birds getting dirtier and losing and broken wings. So I like that. I approve that message.
Very, very good. Well, I think you'll enjoy this game then, because I think Atlanta goes down to defeat.
That soothes my soul, Dennis. That I remember many a year Atlanta would spank New Orleans, and that hurt me. And I hate the Carolina with that damn Panther growl when Saints is losing to the Panthers in the day. That made me so angry. And then Tampa Bay shooting off that pirate cannon. See, then I don't like all that. Yeah, we need, I don't know, it's just, as a Saints fan, that makes me emotionally angry to hear the Panther growl and the Dirty Bird flapping in the touchdown celebration. Need to clip those wings. Anyway, KC, come on, man. I'm going to put I'm going to call up my voodoo friends in New Orleans. We're going to injure them Dirty Birds a little bit. Are we done?
And I hope we see. How about one of those typical Kelsey 10 receptions for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns?
That would, Dennis, all day. I got so much Mahomes and Kelsey, it's not even funny. And I have needs, Dennis. I have needs. I need it this week.
It would be
calling Taylor. Come on, don't
see.
make me call Taylor.
But
fuss at her.
Hopefully she's too busy to be joining the team on the road. I think she's wearing my boy out.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anyway, I will post all this up, all these game things, so you can pontificate about what all it means as well. So anyway, after the show, thanks for listening to the video here. So this is Dr. Bush signing off. Dennis, you gonna sign off?
Good luck.
Okay.
week 3.
Yeah. Okay, we'll stop. Okay, there we go. We have